Why might a cell that's used in nearly every meta build never be used at the maximum +6 perk allotment? That's the question we'll be tackling today. Hello everyone, I am Trevor, I go by TheMrTrails, and welcome to the channel. It's a question that perhaps everyone, even those who end up being the most gigantic-brained of the people who learn the game of Dauntless, will ask at some point. Why not Discipline 6? Discipline is a cell that is essential to the low-life, flawless build playstyle. Discipline's primary effect is to increase critical strike chance. At Discipline +3, it's a 7.5% chance, and at Discipline +6, it is a 15% chance. But many cells in Dauntless have a cost associated with their benefits, and Discipline is no different. The cost of this critical chance is to be limited to having no more than 50% of your maximum HP. This is taken into account after any max HP boosts or reductions, such as Tough or Berserker. The typical endgame player HP with Discipline will be 550, as 1100 is the maximum without the use of Tough. But this drawback that Discipline had quickly turned itself into an advantage. Rage and Wild Frenzy were rather unused cells before the introduction of Discipline, as it took time to get down to low HP, and in that time you could have been working toward killing the behemoth. The condition of needing to be at less than half HP was one that was too inconvenient to meet. But when Discipline showed up on the scene, this meant that you could have unconditional attack speed and damage increase from these cells, and you wouldn't have to sacrifice Predator to have access to them for a flawless hunt. And that's the main reason that Discipline is a good cell to have in a meta loadout, to have access to Rage and Wild Frenzy before even encountering the behemoth. An additional benefit of being half HP is the Blitz Tonic, granting you increased attack speed the lower your HP gets. Being at 50% raises the base attack speed of the Blitz Tonic from 10% to 21%, a sizable increase. But why would we leave Discipline at +3 instead of maxing it out to a +6? Well, there isn't any further reduction to your HP for investing so heavily into Discipline. Currently, the only benefit is that you get an additional 7.5% crit chance. To understand why this isn't so good, we need to take a look at how crits affect your damage output themselves. And for this, we are going to have to dive into 1,000 tons of math, and those of you who don't like math might want to stop watching now. If you do stop now, just know that this video explains that it takes very extreme circumstances for Discipline 6 to be better than Discipline 3 and another cell of 3. A critical strike in Dauntless, like it is in a lot of other games, is a random chance that your attack will deal increased damage. In Dauntless, a critical hit will multiply damage by 1.5, which a standard for many games would be multiplying by 2. With the use of the cell Cunning, you can increase your critical severity by 30%, which will bring this multiplying factor up to 1.8 times damage. We can figure out how much adding additional critical chance will theoretically boost our damage per second output through some math. Subtracting 1 from our crit severity modifier, then multiplying it by the critical strike chance will give us what we could expect for a multiplicative DPS increase. So if we take the 7.5% chance from Discipline 3 multiplied by 1.5 minus 1, we get a 3.75% multiplicative DPS increase. So what exactly does that mean? Say we have an instance where we deal 100 damage repeatedly. We have a 7.5% chance for these hits to deal 150 damage. If we do 1,000 hits at the 7.5% chance, 75 of these hits should crit. If we had no crits, we would deal 100,000 damage with these 1,000 hits for 100 each. But these 75 hits that did crit added an extra 3,750 damage, as each one added another 50 damage to their hits. And this lines up with how a 3.75% multiplicative DPS increase works, as 100,000 multiplied by 1.0375 gives us our new damage dealt number. Raising our critical chance to 15% with Discipline 6 would make this a 7.5% multiplicative DPS, leading leading to an extra 7,500 damage in our 1,000 hit scenario, which sounds pretty good, but what if we had something else with that perk economy? For instance, what if we went for a Berserker 3 instead of the 3 discipline? Well, Berserker is additive damage, so we can't cleanly multiply our damage by 20% unless it was the only cell in our loadout. Let's say that for the 100 damage, we had other damage boosts active totaling 60%. Adding 3 Berserker would make this 80%. If we had 60% damage boost to give us 100 damage, that would mean our base damage value is 62.5. To get our new damage per hit, we multiply 62.5 by 1.8, which comes out to 112.5 damage per hit. If we go for 1,000 hits again, the total damage number is now 112,500, meaning that adding a damage booster to your build instead of the extra crit chance from discipline carries a lot more weight to your overall damage. In this hypothetical scenario, Berserker's 20% additive damage far outpaces Discipline's 3.75% multiplicative damage gain. In this scenario, we get almost 9,000 more damage out of the Berserker over these 1,000 hits. In fact, you need to have more than 433% in active damage bonuses before the 3.75% multiplicative damage increase is worth more than adding another 20% of damage. Dauntless builds almost never get up to such high additive damage bonus values, so within the scope of the game, prioritizing damage bonuses over the extra critical chance is what is desirable. Say if it's not a prismatic slot, then we have a slightly more common situation where we go Discipline 6 or Discipline 3 Rage Hunter 3. Let's say the Behemoth enrages halfway through the fight, meaning of our 1,000 hits, 500 have the damage boost from Rage Hunter 3. 15%. This still adds 4,687.5 damage over the course of those 500 hits, which makes it still more valuable than the extra discipline cell. Even 3 Predator, which we would typically say would be a bad life decision, would add around 9,000 damage over the 100,000 damage example, being almost 3 times as effective as an additional discipline. But what if we added Cunning into this mix to make our crits matter more? Well, Cunning affects the critical damage multiplier, as well as giving a critical chance. Cunning itself is an 8% multiplicative DPS increase. With Discipline 3, we have a 14% multiplicative DPS increase, meaning that a 7.5% crit chance will add a 6% multiplicative DPS with the 1.8 times crit multiplier. Let's now see why, even in a scenario where you're running Cunning, you still shouldn't go Discipline 6. A 6% multiplicative DPS increase adds 6,000 damage to our 1,000 hits of 100 damage example, meaning if we had to choose between an extra discipline and a Berserker cell, if we already had 60% in extra damage, then the Berserker cell would still add around double to the final damage of what the extra discipline cell would in this scenario, even when having this extra crit multiplier from Cunning. You need to have more than 233% in active damage bonuses before 6% multiplicative damage increase is worth more than adding that 20% of damage. The only thing that is going to make Discipline 6 useful is if it gets changed to go lower than 50% HP for more attack speed from Blitz Tonic, or if it gets nerfed so that you need Discipline 6 to reach 50% HP. Let's say, hypothetically, how high would the crit multiplier have to go for Discipline 6 to be worth it in its current state? Well, that's a question we don't really need to answer with a bunch more math, because we had 2.2 times crit multiplier during the crit pot era, which will probably be regarded as the most broken time in Trials history. Negative group times, sub 10 second solo times, all caused by a tonic that when used with Catalyst 6 would give you 40% extra crit chance and 40% onto your crit multiplier. Even with this 2.2 times multiplier, an extra discipline would only add 9% multiplicative damage, which if again our alternative was Berserker, Berserker would still outpace the average effectiveness. But a 57.5% critical chance during that time was large enough to reasonably grind for a run where you would actually crit on 60, 70, even 80% of your hits. Putting Discipline to 6 would only make getting that amount of crits more consistent. But if someone just did more runs than you to get the same amount of crits with Discipline 3 and a damage boost that your build didn't have, they would end up with the faster time. This meant that the top times, even during the times in which crits dominated in this game still weren't using Discipline 6. And the crit pot era is just the real life example for the math behind why Discipline 6 in its current state will never be meta in Dauntless. Thank you guys for watching. If you enjoyed, consider leaving a like. And if you enjoy Dauntless content and are not subscribed already, consider subscribing to the channel. Here I post Dauntless content every week. I've been Trevor, I go by TheMrTrails, and I will catch you guys next time.